master's in higher education. I got my master's in educational leadership, and the focus is higher education and student personnel. And so it was a 2-year program, and I was a graduate coordinator for housing and residence life there for 2 years. Some things that we've seen recently in terms of like how higher education has been changing. The first I think of is particularly funding and how funding has been shifting. And so depending on the university, public versus private. So a lot of public institutions, they get state funding. For community colleges, they typically will get property tax from like the local area to help fund their institution and their initiatives. And then private institutions, they don't get as much state funding. They'll get federal funding, if not any state funding, but they'll get federal funding for a lot of financial aid resources and support, educational funding. The second I'll say, and it's not necessarily comes to the surprise of like yourself, definitely not me, but are the rise of students of concern on the university campus. There's just a lot of conversation around mental health. I think that's a very prevalent topic that is circling student affairs professionals, practitioners, and researchers, and understanding how students deal with the crises and trauma and deal with just various challenging situations while they're students. So in terms of like age difference and like being a young new professional and having a very small gap in terms of my age and like my student staff, it has not been necessarily something that's been challenging in terms of navigating what those supervisory relationships look like with them. At UCF, it was a very formal department, housing and residential life there, where it was very clear on kind of like what supervisor to supervisee expectations were and what boundaries looked like, and holding and everything about supervision and accountability and integrated into that. And so if anything, while I was a grad at UCF, there was even closer proximity age to my RAs there, just because I was younger, but didn't necessarily even feel like a challenge there, just because I felt like the department and the professional staff had given enough advice and support and resources to say, here are healthy boundaries, here are healthy relationships, and it doesn't necessarily hinder you from having a relationship with the student staff, but here is how it's going to be helpful. And so a lot of that training and that background, I think, was helpful for me to transition to while I was here. And you asked what is going to be really important is for students that are interested in entering into the field of student affairs, or those that are about to launch into student affairs like full time. I think it's going to be important to know your why and know why you are doing the work that you are doing, particularly for residential life staff, like we're live on, we're live in. I think the second thing is to really just know yourself, know who you are as a person, know who you are as a professional, because you are establishing like your reputation yourself. If I were to consider a different area that I'd be interested in, potentially career services or professional development for students at the university. I think there will be changes in just staffing at the university, and particularly looking to shift funding of, if we can, might shift funding from student programming and engagement. Not that there's any less value in those, but just looking at how that money is allocated to support areas, offices like CAPS, or initiatives like our CARES program here that have case managers and social workers to connect students to those support resources that are here at the university. There will be, it doesn't necessarily feel like it is as prevalent here as at Cal State Long Beach, online education, but I think there'll still be a large influx and churn towards online education, only because a student can still get the same degree that they would get in online than they would at the university in person. For this upcoming year, we are implementing a residential curriculum, and so we've been working on that for this past academic year and really pushed through it this summer. But one of the, in the curricular model for residential life, one of the things that is a part of that is learning goals and outcomes, and so seeing that students are connected to the resources on campus, they're aware of creating healthy habits that they choose to engage in, and again, having the conversation about social workers and counselors and that need for those resources for students, for mental health, for food or home insecurities, just having those resources available. So it might not be, I don't believe it would be that is like full fleshed out like of other student affairs offices, but like the dean of students and the CARES team, I think that is something that is still essential and would be critical in this time for the university. I think a third thing that would be essential for the university to still function properly would be conduct office, just because there's levels of accountability that have to be maintained for the academic affairs, but also for the human interactions that happen at the university. I think that would be the third most important, because that is really what blends the academic and student affairs well together.